Oh, hello. Today we shall be in the lands of the gods. We'll do that more than once, because there's more than one of them. We shall find lands of beards, burned faces, rabbits, and rowers, and one or two too many lands of mountains. Plus, we will see, if you can see, the land of the free. Welcome to Travel Trivia ASMR and another gentle jaunt around the world. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad you stopped by. Thank you. If you've come back, then thank you even more. The bread and butter of the channel is that we visit one country and select a range of topics of interest to the traveller and present those as quiz questions. Geography, history, the arts, sport, food, a little bit of controversial politics perhaps. But today we turn the idea on its head, and instead of one country and many topics, we have one topic and many countries. Specifically, etymology, the meaning of the names of countries, which can sometimes be very, very apparent and sometimes not easy to guess at all. I'll present the questions in a series of rounds, 4 rounds of 5 questions each, and those rounds will be about first Africa, then Europe, then Asia, or perhaps the other way around. I'm not quite sure of the order yet. The last round will be all the other stuff, the Americas and Oceania, and the reason I've lumped those 3 in together at the end is because this gives us about 50 countries in each round, 50 countries to choose from in each round. There's about 50 countries in Africa, there's about 50 in Europe, there's about 50 in Asia. And if you add North America, South America and Oceania, you also get around 50. So we'll present the questions for each round. You'll have a short list of 50 if you're just listening, and if you choose to look as well, then the map in the background can help you, because I have highlighted the 20 countries that are going to be the answer to the questions. Do please take part. Let me know how you get on in the quiz. Comment on the places that we visit along the way if you have any experience of them. And of course, the easiest thing to do is to press like and subscribe, and that helps the channel grow, so it's much appreciated. So let's get into round 1 and hear the questions for Africa. So I'm going to conceal the map as I set the questions. We will see it again later as we go through the answers. Where in Africa then is the land of God also known as the land of sunset? Just to introduce complication right from the word go, that's one of those places that's like Germany. And spoiler alert, Germany is not the answer here, because it's not in Africa. But Germany is a very well-known example where the English name Germany and the German name Deutschland are not related. And this is the case here. This particular country is known by one thing locally and another thing in English. So where is that? Question 2. Where in Africa is St. Thomas and Prince? grammatically speaking, it would be accurate to say, where in Africa are St. Thomas and Prince, because they are two islands of those names. And speaking of islands, I don't think that gives too much away. Question 3 translates as Malay Island. Which African country is that? Question 4. I already mentioned this at the start. Land of the burned faces. One of those slightly uncomfortable etymologies, because when we see burned we can read black faces. And question 5. The bottom of dry land. Where are those 5 African countries? If you prefer to play along just listening and not look at the map, then of course you can close your eyes. You can, however, use the map to your advantage, and when I reveal it in a moment you will see which 5 African countries have been coloured in, and those are the 5 places in question. So which is which? Land of God or Land of Sunset? St. Thomas and Prince, Malay Island, Land of the Burnt Faces, and the bottom of dry land. If you are watching and not listening, just have a quick look, see if you can sort that out. So question 1 was the Land of God or the Land of Sunset. And a bit of a clue, if you haven't already got there, think about where the sunset is visible. The origin of the English name for this country, which is Land of God, is a Berber word. Now, if you're a geography boffin, you, I'm sure, know whereabouts in Africa the Berbers live, and you're probably honing in on the right answer already. The Berbers, in their language, their words for Land of God would be Amur un Akush. Amur un Akush. And this evolves over time and travels through other languages like Arabic, and it becomes first Tamurakusht, and this gives us the name first of the city, Tamurakusht, Marrakesh. Marrakesh in turn, which was the capital of the Almoravid dynasty and several other empires in this region, that became the name of the country that we know today as Morocco. Marrakesh becomes Morocco. And so Morocco is, at least in English, the Land of God. I'm going to try to find a space to write all of these real names as we go through. It remains to be seen whether I will find space for them. I bet I fail. If you'd like to place a bet, see if I get stuck somewhere along the line. Now, I mentioned that this country is known locally by a different name. We English call it Morocco, and of course Maroc and Marruecos, they're sort of European interpretations of it. But in Arabic, I believe the country is called Al-Maghrib. Al-Maghrib. And Maghrib means sunset in Arabic. And I recently made a video. One of the countries that's up on the channel already is all about Morocco and explores various aspects of geography and history and culture and so on. And I was saying in that video, I swear that I learned when I was there that Morocco means the most western, because Occo looks as if it can be seen in the word occidental, doesn't it, meaning western. But I think that's just me talking out of my hat. I think I've somehow got my wires crossed, and what I learned in Morocco was that Al-Maghrib, the Arabic name, was land of sunset, which could in turn be interpreted as land of the west. So if you're an Arabic speaker, which I confess I'm not, then do let me know if it's true that could be interpreted in both ways. Well done if you spotted Morocco for the first one. Now the second, St. Thomas and Prince, well, that is a barely disguised translation in English of the Portuguese name that we know internationally for two islands discovered by the Portuguese. I want to say that they were uninhabited when the Portuguese discovered them. I know that's true of Cape Verde, which was a Portuguese discovery. I think it might have been true here. Again, in the comments, if you know me to be wrong, then do point it out. But certainly this country is an archipelago of two main islands, and those islands are called St. Thomas and Prince. The standard English name is São Tomé and Príncipe, that being the Portuguese for St. Thomas, and that was discovered by the Portuguese on the 21st of December in 1470. Actually, I've written down 1470 or 1471. Now, I don't think that's me sort of misremembering. I must have seen that they're not actually sure. I don't know how records can be so confused. How can they know that it's the 21st of December but not know what the year was? That's odd. Well, anyway, they named the island after St. Thomas's Day, which is the 21st of December. Oh, perhaps that's how they know. They know that it was the 21st of December because they know that that's St. Thomas's Day, hence the name São Tomé, but they didn't write down what the year was. Maybe that's it. Okay. And the other island, Príncipe, was named for a prince of Portugal, and I think the Prince of Portugal was going to be the governor of the island, or the chief tax taker, or something like that. Whatever European authority was imposed on that place was certainly stamped all over the name. São Tomé and Príncipe is St. Thomas and Prince. So that was number 2. Question 3 was Malay Island. Which African country is Malay Island? Now, wouldn't it be fun if this was actually Chad or something, something right in the middle of the landmass? Spoiler, no, it isn't. It is an island, and if you've got your glasses on, you will, I'm sure, have spotted that there is only one other island that has been highlighted. It's this one here. It's obviously the island of Madagascar. Madagascar apparently means Malay Island. and that's curious. In fact, I've seen two totally different suggestions of how the name Madagascar came about, and this is worth saying in general for etymology that a lot of the time it is a best guess by people many hundreds of years later, and translation even in modern times from one language to another, a word can be translated in a number of ways depending on the context. So that's why you get varying stories. I'm going with this one as what seems to be the most accepted one. The name Malay comes from Gesira Malay, which was apparently written on an Arabic map from the year 1154. It's an extraordinarily long time ago, isn't it? Almost, what's that? Nearly 900 years ago. This map was written in Arabic with the name Gesira Malay, suggesting that people had come from the area that we associate with the word Malay now, Malaysia, and they'd come here, seafarers, and they'd found this island and named it Malay Island, Gesira Malay. And hence you get, in the Malagasy language of Madagascar, you get Madagascara, Madagascara comes from Gesira Malay. Somehow that all works out. But there is a totally different suggestion of the word Madagascar, which is a bit more far-fetched. And that is that the word Mogadishu, which of course is now the capital of Somalia, and it's up here, that was an embarkation point for a ship or a fleet of ships. And those ships travelled down and discovered this island, and the name Mogadishu became confused with Madagascar. I suppose you can imagine that for stupid people, Madagascar and Mogadishu sound similar. And when I say stupid people, I mean Europeans trying to interpret the language of people they come across. A little bit of colonial confusion. You'll know, if you're a regular viewer already of the channel, that I do tend to heap a little ridicule on colonial powers meddling in other places as they did. And we can be light-hearted, or we can perhaps be a little downcast when it comes to number 4 as well, because number 4, Land of the Burned Faces. Land of the Burned Faces. Well, burned means black, so we're talking about people who have arrived probably from Europe, and then they've seen people in what is practically the cradle of mankind. This is where, somewhere in this part of Africa, it is where man first evolved from pre-human species, and those people, the native people there, are black, and so black faces or burned faces, however you want to put that, comes from ancient Greek. Athos. Athos is the verb burn in Greek, and so you've got athos plus ops. Ops is a face. Ops is face. Athos is burn. So you put athos and op together. Athos, op, aethiop, aethiop. Those two words merge and travel into Latin to become Ethiopia. Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the land of black or burned faces. where am I going to write this so that such that it's not in the way? Let's put it here, down here. Land of burned faces. So say the origin of the word Ethiopia. And finally, question 5, finally for this round. Where is the bottom of the dry land? Well, the bottom of is my own crude way of trying to say south, but without using the word south. South is a bit of a no-brainer, but dry land is the meaning of Africa. The bottom of dry land. Africa, I have found at least 5 reasons why that is called Africa, or 5 places that might have come from, which is another way of saying nobody quite knows. There's a linguistic concept called backronym, which is where you think of an origin of a word and subscribe, you ascribe that origin to the word after the event. And some of these might be exactly that. So Africa could come from Phoenician, Africa Terra, meaning land of the Afri, and the Afri in turn were a tribe. And even in Phoenician, how appropriate for the delightful chaos of Africa that we have a beep from outside. Even within Phoenician, there's no agreement about where Africa came from, because it could also come from the Phoenician word afar, which means dust. So hence dry land, dusty land would be afar, Africa. Then again, it could come from a Berber language, the Ifran, or the inhabitants of a mountain called Jebel Yafran, in modern day Morocco, I suppose. And Yafran, you can see how that might in turn become Africa. There's also a Greek word, Afrika, transcribed in English as Aprika. Aprika means without cold. The Latin aprica means sunny. I wonder if that's related to the word apricot. Could be, couldn't it? And there's also a suggestion of an ancient Egyptian origin, which is Afroika, meaning turning towards the Ka. And Ka, I think, is the motherland, meaning the origin of humanity. So in short, who knows what Africa means? I'm going with dry land, and so the bottom the bottom of dry land is South Africa. So there we are. The land of God, or the land of sunset, is Morocco. St. Thomas and Prince is Sao Tome and Principe. Malay Island is Madagascar. Land of the burned faces is Ethiopia, and the bottom of the dry land is South Africa. And if you've got some or any of those right, then do make a note of your score so that you can boast at the end and share your correct answers with everybody in the comments. So then, where shall we go next? What do you fancy? Shall we do Asia next or Europe? You know, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do Asia next. So I need to give some thought to where on earth I'm going to write these things. I'm so going to run out of space. There's a little game you can play as we go. See if you can predict what a catastrophe that becomes. So here we go then. 5 countries in Asia, which I have concealed on the map. So Just use your brain power for the time being as you listen. Can you work out which Asian country is river land? River land. And if you think of the great rivers of Asia, then you will of course be stepping in the right direction. It is not an obscure river that we need to think about. I mentioned at the start that we have several lands named after mountains, and here is one of them. Which Asian country has a name that means mountain islands? Mountain islands. And yes, that's not a trick either. That is going to be an island nation. Question 8, with a special nod to any viewers in the USA. I'm terribly sorry, but the USA is not the original land of the free. It's not uncharitable, I hope, to say that the country that is the answer to this question is not one that we would think of straight away when we think of the word free, but maybe it's exactly the opposite of that, just to give you a clue. And next question, question 9. Well, in the previous round for Africa we had a land of God. Here's another one. Humans don't tend to agree on who is the god above gods, so why should country names be any different? Country number 9 is the land of the supreme god, but where is that? And question 10, for a look. It's another mountain. This may be a supplementary question for maybe not this video, but this series of videos. Just how many countries are there in the world that are named after mountains? This is the second one of this round. If 7 is mountain islands, then 10 is mountain land. Where in Asia is that? So we've got riverland, mountain islands, land of the free, land of the supreme god, and mountain land. Let us regard the map again, and I'll just give you a moment to put the pieces together, find those 5 Asian countries, and decide which is which. Question 6 then was river land. River lands. So which great Asian river did you think of? I should just mention, by the way, that although most of Russia is in Asia, it is not going to be one of the answers in this round. That's going to be one of the answers in the European round. So we need 5 other places, some of which you may have seen highlighted. Not all of the countries are very, very easy to see, of course, because if they're tiny islands, then it's a bit of a challenge. But you can see the answer to number 6, Riverland, because it's one of the largest nations in the world. I think it's what would it be in the ranking of large nations? Russia, Canada, China, USA. I think Brazil is next. Oh, Australia. I think this might be the seventh. It's something like the seventh or eighth largest nation in the world. India is our river land, and I'm going to write that. Actually, I'll take advantage of the emptiness of China there and just write it there. Riverland comes from Sanskrit. Sindhu. Sindhu is the Sanskrit word for river, which in turn gives us Indus, the name of the river Indus, and that of course gives us the modern name India. I think it also gives us the word Hindu, and that comes from Old Persian. So the name of that river from Sanskrit, the Sanskrit word for river, gives us both the name of the nation India and the name of the religion Hinduism. That is according to what I have gleaned from my travels and from my reading. I did recently make a video about India as well, one of my favourite places of all the ones I've travelled to. I've actually clapped eyes on the Indus River, but not in India. I saw that river in Pakistan. But the one in India, the holiest of all Hindu rivers, is the Ganges. And if you're a fan of India, you're a fan of the Ganges, then do click around and look for the India video on this channel, because there's a whole wealth of fascinating stuff that I learned in India, which I'm really keen to share with you. So, Riverland is India. Next, 7. Where are the mountain islands? Well, this is one of those places that's almost impossible to see on the map. In fact, my eyes are so bad that, in spite of the fact I know that I've highlighted it, I can't really see it. You can, I hope, see it on the screen. I can't see it on the piece of paper in front of me because it's minuscule. But the etymology here, we have a Tamil word. You'll be familiar with the idea of Tamil languages being spoken in the south of India and in Sri Lanka. But Sri Lanka is not the answer because it's not highlighted. The Tamil word mala, M-A-A-L-A, mala, means mountain. Now, there's also a Tamil word for island, which is Tivu, T-H-E-E-V-U. So if you put Malativu means mountain island. Malativu could merge and come down to us as the name of this country. Or, oh, here we go again. Here's another possible origin of this name. Or it could come from Sanskrit, meaning garland of islands. There's a Sanskrit word, Maladvipa. And so one of those two things must be right, but they, between them, point to mountain islands, and Malativu or Maladvipa becomes Maldives. See if I can just squeeze that into this gap here. Mountain islands. Now remember the suggestion of the Tamil Mala, meaning mountain, gives us Maldives, and it also gives us a mountain land in question 5, Mala. That might help you with question 10 when we get there. Sorry, I said question 5, I meant question 5 in this round, but 10 overall. On to question 8. Where is the land of the free? I've got too many notes about this. This is another place where the the endonym and the exonym are not the same. Endonym, I think, meaning the name by which the country knows itself, and the exonym is a name that foreigners know it as. Either way, we do have a land here which has in history been known two ways, and that is Iran and or Persia. Persia. Well, let's start with Persia, because that was the way that in the English-speaking world we knew this place. Persia comes from an old Persian word, Parsa, which is it remains the central district within this region, and so the Greeks take this away and they deliver it into Latin, and then this becomes Persia in English. And of course, we don't really use that word now. The modern country is called Iran, and where am I going to put that? Let's stick that up here. Land of the free for Iran. And this comes from, where does that come from? The word Arya is from a Proto-Indo language, and this is, well, you see, the thing about Arya, Arya, is there's all sorts of directions that has gone in. For example, the Greek word aristocrat, Arya and aristocrats, you can see the connection there. And one imagines that the aristocrat is the person who has all the rights. Going back in history, the only group of people who were free to do what they wished were aristocrats at one point, and so perhaps that idea of free only means a very select group of people who have freedom. And it may also, I'm just looking at the spelling Arya, surely it's not a stretch to imagine that gives us Aryan as well, as in that idea of an Aryan race, which has troubled connections in history. So yes, free, land of the free, brackets, nothing of the sort springs to mind, but that is, so say, the origin of the word Iran, coming from Arya. Question 9. The land of the supreme God. The supreme God. Well, this isn't entirely surprising, because if you think of the Holy Land, the part of the world that is dear to probably half the world's population, if not more than that, the focus of activity and the origin stories of Christianity and Islam and Judaism, it's all connected with the Holy Land, the Middle East, and so it's one of these here. It's the one which is highlighted here, the land of the supreme God. It comes from another ancient Greek word, which I think has come from an even older language. Yes, an Akkadian word. Now, Akkadian refers to a really, really old language. We're talking 2,000 years before Christ. So 4,000 years ago, people were speaking a language called Akkadian, and they had a word for Assur. They had a word Assur, A-S-S-U-R, there are what I would call, what do you call those in French, the two dots? Or is it not in French? In German, well, what are they called? I can't think what they're called. You'll tell me in the comments, do please. The two S's in the word assur have a double dot over them, and so the pronunciation might be assur, something like that. Anyway, this travels into ancient Greece and it becomes Assyria, and of course this word Syria referred to a much wider land than it does today. Obviously modern Syria, but also Lebanon, Turkey, Iraq was the place known as Syria to the ancient Greeks. So Syria is the land of the supreme god. Where on earth am I going to write that? I'm just going to have to blitz it across the north of Africa. Land of the supreme god for Syria. Well done if you worked that out. I think that's one of the more difficult ones in today's quiz. However, question 10 is maybe one of the easier ones if you've been picking up the clues, and that is mountain land. Mountain land. When I mentioned earlier with the Maldives that the Tamil word mala means mountain, well, of course, that has also travelled into Latin, I think, as Malay, and the Latin habit is to add Shia, S-I-A, onto the end of, well, everywhere. So Malaysia means land of mountains from this original Tamil word. Where should we put that? Let's squeeze that in here. Mountain land is the origin of the word Malaysia. And I have also read an article about the origin of the word Malaysia, in which the author never actually made a decision about where it had come from. So that could be another example of a backronym where they've tried to peg the word Malay onto a Tamil word, Mala. I suppose that's not far-fetched, because there could have been travel by sea or over land, I suppose. Yes, maybe Tamils come over here, discover a land of mountains. Of course, it's also long ago that maybe all of this is nonsense. But it's fun to play along, and well done if you've got 5 out of 5 on the Asian round. Riverland is India. Mountain islands are the Maldives. Land of the free is Iran. Land of the supreme god is Syria. And mountain land is Malaysia. So if you're on 10 out of 10 so far on Africa and Asia, then well, that's amazing. So 10 down, 10 to go. Where should we go next? Let's get a new bit of paper. And just before I conceal the map, to give you some thinking time, let's go to Europe. If you've drifted off to sleep and woken up again halfway through, we're about to go into round 3. We'll do Europe, and then round 4 will be the round including the Americas and Oceania. So here we go with Europe, and our first question in Europe: where is land of rabbits? rabbits. Not immediately obvious, that one, I don't think. I lived in this place for quite a number of years before I discovered that this was the origin of the name. But for question 12, we go to the polar opposite of that. Where in Europe is the land of ice? We are not in the business of giving out points or prizes in these travel trivia ASMR quizzes, but if we were doing that, then you would get nothing at all. For question 12, yes, it is the obvious thing that you think it is. Here's a harder one though. 13. Where in Europe is dignified land? Dignified land. Question 14. Now, I think there may even be more than one possible answer to question 14. So we shall have to have a careful caveat when we get there. But at least one country in Europe has a name which means Black Mountain. And just to give you a clue there, the words Black Mountain are translated into Spanish and then expressed in English as this country's name. And then question 15 is land of oarsmen. Oarsmen. That's perhaps a bit fanciful. I said at the start of the video that we were meeting a land of rowers. This means oarsmen. So there are 5 European countries. Before we look at the map again, can you spot where is the land of rabbits, the land of ice, the dignified land, the Black Mountain, and the land of oarsmen? See what you can spot. And whilst you're examining the map and thinking, well, which country is which, I'm examining the map and thinking, where am I going to write all of these things? Well, that's my problem. Your problem is, where's the land of rabbits? Now, I'm not blessed with the best eyesight. I can see to walk along the road, but you know, if somebody says, "Oh, look at that bird," you know, I can't identify what species of bird it is. I can't even see the bird half the time. And so it is with the rabbits that apparently gave their name to this land of rabbits. I lost track of the number of times that I was walking along in the land of rabbits, and my companion, whoever it was, would say, "Oh, there's one." And I would look around and the rabbit would have bounded off before I could clap eyes on it. I did finally see a rabbit in the land of rabbits. In any case, it might just be a mistake. Etymology is full of mistakes. That's what makes it such fun. We apparently have a Punic word, and the Punic word is sepanim, or maybe sepanim. Not quite sure where the stress is there. Sepanim. That is a word for a hyrax. Hyrax, which is an animal that is not a rabbit but looks a bit like one, I suppose. Maybe the people who first spotted them were short-sighted like me. But this word shepanim, if you add the prefix I shepanim, this means land of hyraxes. So land of hyraxes, possibly mistaken for land of rabbits. Ishepanim, of course, makes its way into Latin as Hispania, and then modern Spanish as España, which we of course call Spain. So yeah, land of rabbits. Who knew? Who knew that the land of rabbits is Spain? Not me, for many years of living there, that's for sure. But number 12 is a short discussion. Where's the land of ice? It's not going to be very easy to disguise this in any way. The Old Norse Island literally means ice land. Does anyone have any further comment? I have read that there's quite an amusing joke actually that Iceland and Grönland, I think, Iceland and Greenland, they both come from the Old Norse language, and they should actually be the other way around, because a lot of Iceland is actually green, and of course a lot of Greenland is covered in ice. So arguably, Iceland is not the name that should have been given to that land, but there's been a suggestion that this was an attempt to dissuade outsiders from coming and showing up on the island and saying, oh, I think we'll have this for ourselves, please. Something which is slightly topical, isn't it, as the fate of Greenland is in the news as I make this video. Anyway, Iceland, rightly or wrongly, was called that by the Old Norse people, Island. Now, dignified land, where is that? Dignified. Now, it's worth saying that dignified is a perhaps generous way of interpreting a word which could also mean old, in the sense of an older person. And it's worth remembering that the way that names come into our modern languages is that it's come from very, very old languages via ancient Greek. And so it should be no great surprise that connotations of ancient Greek are positive. Not least here, because we are talking about the word Greece. Yet again, I've got to think carefully about where to write this. Let's put it here. Dignified. Oh, just about got space. Dignified land. Might have to have a rethink about how to do this map and where to write my little names. Anyway, dignified land. From a Proto-Indo-European language, a verb meaning to grow old. I believe that verb in Greek is greikoi, and we mean grow old in a dignified way. And so this idea was already there in ancient Greek, and then it went into Latin and has become the international, or at least the English speakers' name for Greece. Of course, the Greeks don't call their country Greece. They call it Hellas, and that is the name of a god in ancient Greek. So another example of endonym and exonym being different. So our dignified land was Greece. Now, Black Mountain, I mentioned earlier that there are a number of countries in the same region whose names translate as Black Mountain. Well, the one that's highlighted, it may be difficult to see exactly which one I've picked out, but the one that is highlighted on the map is the correct answer. Of course, in Spanish, the words Black Mountain translate as Monte Negro, and so that is the country in question, Montenegro, which is so tiny. But there it is. I'm just going to have to plaster those words here. Black Mountain. Tell you what, if you were a graphic designer, which as you can see I'm not, do please feel free to leave your suggestions about how I could organise this differently to write the names in a more systematic way. I don't know. On the other hand, it's nice to be slightly improvised about it. The Montenegrin word for their country is Crna Gora, and I think I haven't actually written this much in my notes, but I remember when visiting Montenegro, I think I remember reading that Crna Gora is just the Serbian way of saying Black Mountain. So either way, you've got Crna Gora, Montenegro, meaning Black Mountain, and they refer to a specific mountain, I think, at least in the Venetian account of Venetian sailors who have only come from Venice, which isn't far away. They're referring to Mount Lovchen, which can be seen from the coast, I suppose. Montenegro is Black Mountain. And where then is the land of oarsmen? Land of oarsmen. Well, there's only one country highlighted in Europe that we haven't mentioned yet, and even those of us with poorer eyesight should be able to spot that. Jumping out of the page, it is, of course, this rather large one here. Land of oarsmen. Well, who knew? Who knew that was the origin of the word Russia? Wow. Let's just pop that here. I'm spoilt for space now. The land of oarsmen. How does Russia come from that? Oh, well, it's Old Norse again. Hello to the Old Norse. The word rods in Old Norse apparently means row. Okay, and so that is taken into Greek. Once again, Rhodes becomes Rosia, meaning the land of the Ros, or the land of the oarsmen. And this is generally agreed to be a group of people called the Rus, and that might actually be a group of people who lived in Sweden, as is now, and then travelled into Russia and settled there. I suppose that would explain why it comes from Old Norse. Right, okay. So you've got the Old Norse rowers, they moved from Sweden into Russia, and then that name is picked up by the ancient Greeks. Okay, I'm sort of there. Rossiya means land of rowers or oarsmen. How did you do in our European round then? The land of rabbits is Spain. 12. The land of ice is, what was it again? Oh yes, Iceland. Dignified land is Greece. Black Mountain, at least the one chosen here, is Montenegro. Perhaps in a future video we'll see another country whose name means Black Mountain. And 15, the land of oarsmen, is Russia. And so, to our final round, as I find a new piece of paper. And you study the map. A few seconds more, remembering that we're going to the Americas and the Pacific for Oceania this time. And in case you're throwing your hands up in horror and saying, well, wait a minute, why doesn't North America get a round of its own? Well, it's because there are not as many countries, 50 odd countries in each of Africa, Europe and Asia. Well, to get to a similar number again, I've added together North and South America plus Oceania. So here we go, with about 50 countries to choose from, unless you've already studied the map. Our 16th question is a country that means rich coast. If you are a Spanish speaker like me, that will not be hard. And indeed, there are quite a few countries in the Americas where knowledge of Spanish is a giveaway, and bearded is the origin of one of those. In fact, there are two places that I can think of that come from the word bearded. Only one of them is a country in its own right, and that is the answer to number 17. Now, I said earlier that if we were in the business of giving out points and prizes, you would get nothing for Iceland. You do, however, get 100 points if you know where is the land of Mr. Milbank. I suppose the Mr. might be a bit of a clue if you know your South American history. Oh, shock. Just gave you a bit of a clue by mistake. South America. Okay. So we've got 3 in the Americas there, and the last 2 are going to be in Oceania, the Pacific region. And the 4th question in this round is Islands of a Wealthy King. I've been a little bit cryptic there. There is a specific name of a specific king. If you know your Bible, you will know this king's name, and you'll be able to identify which islands are named after him. And question 20, the final one in the quiz and the last one in this round. Well, after you've collected your 100 points for Land of Mr. Milbank, you can have 1,000 points if you know which nation is named I Go to the Beach. Which 5 countries have names that mean rich coast, bearded, land of Mr. Milbank, islands of a wealthy king, and I go to the beach? There's the map. I mean, you haven't a hope of seeing some of these, they're so tiny. But think about it anyway. Yes, I've just noticed that I was perhaps a little careless in the position I chose for writing the name of Malaysia, but here we are. That's life. We start this round in the Americas. Actually, we've got one in Central America. No, we've got one in Central America, one in the Caribbean, and one in South America. So then, Rich Coast. No great surprises here. I think even if you don't speak much Spanish, you can probably work out that costa is the Spanish word for coast and rica is the Spanish word for rich. So rich coast is Costa Rica. Costa Rica. Apparently they're not quite sure who came up with that name. It's from the time of Christopher Columbus, the Spanish exploration of the New World, of course. They travelled around all of these lands, and it is said that when they encountered the lush landscape of today's Costa Rica, they thought, "Oh, that looks like a place of riches." And in Spanish terms, that did not mean natural riches. They weren't talking about lush vegetation and so on. They meant there's wealthy people there, because they'd already discovered elsewhere that there were people in the Americas who had a lot of gold, and they assumed that Costa Rica would be no exception. In fact, it was an exception. I've been to Costa Rica a couple of times, and I remember learning there that one reason that it is particularly stable today is that the Spanish did not find riches, and therefore they didn't settle it in the same way as some of its neighbours, and so you didn't have a hierarchy or a two-tier system of the colonial powers and the local underprivileged. In many South and Latin American countries, that them and us kind of set up then evolved into a power imbalance at the time of independence. Well, because the Spanish didn't find riches in the place that they called Costa Rica, they kind of made themselves scarce again, and they just left the locals to get on with it. I'm generalising, but I have heard that it is one reason why Costa Rica is a lot more stable than many other countries in the region. So the so-called rich coast was not rich at all in the way that the Spanish meant it, but ironically it is now one of the richest countries in the area because of that. Now, what is bearded? Bearded is so impossible to see. It is the name of an island. In fact, it's the name of two islands. In fact, I may earlier have said that this comes from Spanish as well, but I now see in my notes that it's attributed to the Portuguese. It's a moot point because it'd be the same word, Barbados. Barbados in Portuguese and Barbados in Spanish means bearded people. It's plural, Barbados. So bearded people, and this is a name that's been found on a map by a Venetian, a Genoese cartographer of the 16th century, and he might not have been referring to people. It's thought that the word Barbados might just refer to the appearance of some vegetation seen from the ships. You can imagine on the shoreline you might see trees with figs hanging down. It looks like beards. Well, Barbados is, of course, now Barbados in English, which is somewhere here, although I can't see it on the page myself. The island of Barbuda, as in Antigua and Barbuda, also means bearded, I think, but that is of course only part of a country name, whereas Barbados in its entirety means bearded. Land of Mr. Milbank. Oh yes, this is where I owe 100 points if you've pieced this one together. So who is Mr. Milbank? Well, okay. If you're looking at the map, you've seen the answer because it's the only one left in the Americas and it's the only one highlighted in South America. This one here, Bolivia. Bolivia. So how come that the land of Mr. Milbank becomes Bolivia? How on earth does that work? Well, of course, it's all about the surname of Simon Bolivar. I do have a video about Bolivia on this channel already. I made it recently, and one of my favourite countries in South America. Talked quite a lot in that video about the way that the fight for independence of the early 19th century can be seen in modern day Bolivia, and Bolivar is not just celebrated as an independence fighter in Bolivia, but also in Venezuela, which is where he was from, in Argentina, where he well, of course, Bolivia and Argentina were all part of the same thing in the era of Spanish control. So Bolivar, a much lauded figure in many South American countries. Well, where does Simon Bolivar's name come from? Well, he was from Venezuela, but the surname, the Spanish surname Bolivar, spelt with a B, B-O-L-I, B-A-R, apparently is originally Basque. So you can imagine that it's come from the Basque country and travels to South America along with the Spanish. And in Basque, apparently it's the name of a village in the Basque country. Bolivar is in the Basque country, and that comprises two Basque words, bolu and ibar. Bolu meaning mill, and ibar meaning riverbank. Bolu and ibar, mill plus riverbank, gives us Milbank. What amuses me, as you will know if you are a British person, if you're familiar with London, the street that runs along the river by the Houses of Parliament is called Milbank. So that street by the River Thames in London and the country of Bolivia, they basically mean the same thing, Milbank. I love stuff like that. Oh, I don't know about ASMR, which is hopefully giving you a few shivers and tingles, but just that kind of coincidence of two completely different things coming from the same origin, that sends a shiver down my spine. Land of Mr. Milbank is Bolivia. Now then, question 19, our penultimate question, the islands of a wealthy king. And we travel to the South Pacific, to the region called Oceania. And it's not entirely far-fetched, actually, to have the Americas and Oceania as part of one group, because we non-flat earthers know that it's actually a contiguous region. You know, if we were to take this and put it over here, then we could actually draw a circle around it. But in the European standard way of presenting the world map, it looks as if they were in disparate sections. In fact, they're not. Anyway, stop making excuses for the makeup of the round and get on with the answer, man. Which is the country called Islands of a Wealthy King? Well, it's the one that you can possibly see highlighted on the map. The wealthy king in question is the one from the Bible, the biblical King Solomon. King Solomon. The Solomon Islands of a wealthy king. King Solomon is our biblical figure. What can I tell you about King Solomon? Well, I'm not going to tell you anything about the character in the Bible. That's not really the purpose here. But why is the country or the group of islands named after King Solomon? Well, apparently there's a Spanish explorer who's got an extraordinarily long name, Alvaro de Mendaña y Neira. He was just a very Christian man, and he clapped eyes on these islands. I wonder if this story is going to sound familiar. He clapped eyes on these islands, the Solomon Islands, and thought, hello, these islands look as if they're going to be full of wealth. What wealthy figure can I think of to assign a name to these islands? Oh, I know. Let's have El Rey Solomon, King Solomon, him of the famous mines, and therein the origin of the name Solomon Islands has come to us from the concept of the wealth that the Spanish were going to find there. I mentioned that this proved to be a mistake in the case of of Costa Rica. I'm not sure about the Solomon Islands because I have yet to travel to that part of the world. It's sort of the Holy Grail, isn't it? Maybe if you're kindly viewing from Australia or New Zealand, where this part of the world is within sort of holiday distance, maybe you have had the chance, but from Europe, this is absolutely the pinnacle of ambition in terms of travel. One day, I shall not only visit the islands of the wealthy king, but I will go to the beach. I go to the beach. Now, I've taken the trouble on my Google Maps to actually pinpoint where this last place is, because it is so small. It's so impossible to see that in spite of highlighting it, I might even have just written over it by mistake. It's right over here. I go to the beach. The word in the island in the island's language is anauero, and of course this becomes the word Nauru, and here it is. Just to borrow Google Maps in the dying embers of our video, there's Nauru, which is off to the northeast of the island of New Guinea, and kind of looks as if it might be due north of New Zealand. Yes. So Nauru, somewhere here, is I go to the beach. The third smallest country in the world, a mere 8 square miles. Who knows whether we will ever get there? I tell you what, if you have been to Nauru, then you can get 10,000 bonus points on top of the 1,000 bonus points that you got for working out the meaning of its name. So let's just recap the 5 answers for our final round. The Americas and Oceania. Rich Coast was Costa Rica. Bearded is Barbados. Land of Mr. Milbank is Bolivia. The islands of a wealthy king are the Solomon Islands. And I go to the beach. Nauru. And so we arrive at the end of our little gentle jaunt around 20 countries in the world. I'm sure there will be a second episode of this little etymological jaunt around the world, and who knows, taking 20 countries at a time, we might even get through 10 episodes between now and, I don't know, the end of time. If you've enjoyed this video, this quiz, do please do leave a comment. Let us know how many of those answers you got right. If you know better than me in some of those etymologies, if you have heard another story about where a name comes from, then it would be thrilling to hear that. Please do further the conversation in the comments. And also, I'm really enjoying hearing from some of you who've suggested other ideas for quizzes. The nature of the channel is not to rattle through a quick-fire quiz, but to present a quiz which can give the opportunity for discussion about the answers. So anything that might be the fascinating meat of a quiz about the countries of the world, then I'd be delighted to hear from you. Do please press that like button, subscribe to the channel, and you'll be back here, I'm sure, for another gentle jaunt around the world here on Truffle Trivia ASMR.